called to be witnesses and storytellers. That's what we are. We are called to be witnesses and storytellers. Back in 1993, the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry published a document called The Challenge of Adolescent Evangelization, or Catholic Youth Evangelization, called to be witnesses and storytellers. And it talked about how we, as a people, from generation to generation, have been able to hand on the faith that has kept our people alive. I mean, how do we do that when you stop and think about it? For centuries, no books. For centuries, no TV, no radio, no internet, God forbid. You know, there was none of those things. How do we do that? And in the midst of that, something that you and I kind of take for granted, something that you and I live by and live with every single day, universal literacy. The assumption that everyone can and should know how to read and write. That idea is only about 150 to 200 years old. For millennia, the vast majority of human beings had no clue of what those squiggly lines looked like, if they even existed. The idea that everyone can and should read and write is a product of the Enlightenment movement. 250 years ago, came here to this country about 150 years ago as a general idea. And we still don't have it. The vast majority of the world is illiterate. So how do we pass on these stories of our faith? We've been doing it. It's been going on. It's been happening. You and I are here because people told the stories of what we believe. You know, and so Tom would go out and he would run his shop in downtown, and at the end of the day, he'd come home and he'd sit around with his family and he'd say, you know, somebody stole from me today. What should I do? Do I cut his hand off? What do I do? How do I live what Jesus said? How do I forgive? And still, how do I make a living? How does all this work? They told the stories. And they pointed to other people and said, you want to learn how to grow up and be a man or a woman? And in their mind, a man or a woman was automatically a person of faith. Well, be like Paul Danielson. Just pointed to him. You know, be like Marie Roberta. Pointed to her. And they just said, be like that. Witnesses, men and women who stood as living examples of what the gospel looks like in flesh and blood. And they told the stories. That's how our stained glass windows came about. Not just ours, but in all the great cathedrals of the world. They're visual stories of what we believe. And they're passed down from generation to generation. We do that now in this season of Advent. The season of Advent is a rich, magical season of the church year. The air is thick with all of the things that we believe. We come in here and we're surrounded with more than just our usual symbols. We have obviously our Advent wreath. Well, the Advent wreath was first invented in the 1830s in Germany, in the Lutheran community. Came here to the United States in the 1930s, so it's not that old. But it was a way of marking the passage of time as we approached the season of Christmas. The Advent wreath, here ours is a little bit different. You know, we're practical and we also have fire codes to deal with. But an Advent wreath is made of evergreens in a circle. The circle being the endless cycle of God with no beginning and no end. God, eternal, no beginning, no end. Evergreens, ever alive, ever fresh, ever new. When everything else dies and goes away, the evergreen stands as the sign of life, a sign of hope. And the 4 candles mark the 4 Sundays of Advent. In the original Advent wreath, there were the 4 Sunday candles, and then there were 50 daily candles. And they lit 1 red candle for each day and a white candle for Sunday. We just simplify it and do it with 4 Sunday candles. That passage of time. Time is so important to us. We wait for the coming of the Messiah. And we move forward day by day, closer and closer to the celebration of Christmas. I first got to understand what Advent was all about when I was a kid growing up in Middletown, New York. My great aunt, Alice, owned what was definitely the world's ugliest car. She had a large 1956 powder blue Pontiac. White leather interior with clear plastic slipcovers so we couldn't get it dirty. And she would come to visit us on Saturday, and she always arrived at 9:30 in the morning. Not at 9:35 and not at 9:25. 9:30. Very punctual. But we were up at 7 o'clock, helping Mom get the house ready, helping Mom, do different things, and then annoying Mom by saying, "Mom, what time is it? Is Aunt Alice going to be here? When is she coming?" And we would sit on the back of the sofa. My sister Pam and I would sit on the back of the sofa, looking out the window, waiting for Aunt Alice. And it was a time of excitement. Remember Deacon Bill talked about that active waiting. That was really something that kind of tore us up, because we knew for sure that when Aunt Alice came, it was going to be a fun day, and it would definitely include a hot fudge sundae. Didn't matter. Somewhere there would be a hot fudge sundae. That sense of excitement of what we were looking for. That's Advent. That sense of excitement. For our God, when He comes, will bring new things, exciting moments. And so the Advent wreath marks the passage of time. During Lent, we have the Stations of the Cross that we celebrate on Fridays, in which we walk with Jesus from His judgment by Pontius Pilate through to His crucifixion on Calvary. We don't really have something like that for Advent, but we can call Advent the Stations of the Crib. We mark the passage of time as we walk with the Old Testament prophets, John the Baptist, the last of the Old Testament, into the New Testament, Mary and Joseph, walking with them in this experience of the coming of the Messiah. And we build that, just as the light builds on our Advent wreath, so also it builds in our nativity scene. Now, I don't know if you're paying attention to the entrance procession, but at every Mass during the Advent season, there's an additional person, actually additional 2 people, in the procession. There is someone carrying a figure that goes into the nativity scene. Sometimes it's a young person, sometimes a not so young person, but they are carrying a figure, and they go directly over to the nativity scene and add it. 4 Masses a Sunday, 4 figures are added every weekend. The nativity scene, our image of the birth of Jesus, builds a little bit at a time during this Advent season. The air around us is thick with images, change, new birth, life, hope. These are the things of our Advent season. 50 years ago, when our bishops were meeting in the Second Vatican Council, they published a document entitled Gaudium et Spes, or the Church in the Modern World. And chapter 19 begins with this statement: our highest human goal is to encounter God. We are born for love, kept alive by love, and fullness of life comes when we recognize love and freely embrace it. Sadly, many people today cannot glimpse or perceive this intimate calling. The highest human goal is to encounter God. We are born in love, kept alive by love, and fullness of life comes when we recognize love. And as our bishops point out, sadly, too many people in our world today do not recognize that. And so they do not recognize the Messiah who is present with us. Witnesses, called to be witnesses to the presence of love. You yourselves, stop and think, in your life, what have you done for the sake of love? What sacrifices have you made for love? What changes in your life have you made for love? For love of your parents, for love of your children, for love of your spouse, for the love of God. Love is what moves us the deepest. Love is what moves us the furthest. Love is what changes our lives. And so the witnessing that we need to do is to witness to the power and the presence of love. And the stories that we need to tell are the stories of the way in which love has changed our lives. This is the coming of the Messiah. This is the experience of our God. And you and I, today, and all through this week, we are called to be witnesses and storytellers of the advent of our God.